Lesson 52, Chemical Mixture Problems, Part A. In these chemical mixture problems, these are word problem forms. I'm going to give you 6 steps and a formula, and then we're going to go ahead and work on solving some of these. So, let me give you the formula first. This formula is what we're going to base our steps off of and then filling in some information, and then we're going to use this to set up different equations to solve. So, the formula is number of units times the percent of whatever you're looking for, percent of something, and it's going to be equal to the units of something. And that's whatever chemical we're looking for. Alright, so the formula is number of units times the percentage of whatever we're looking for, and that's going to be equal to the units of what we're looking for. Alright, let's look at some steps to solve these problems. Step 1. We want to draw a chart and we want to label the columns and rows. We'll look at some examples once we write down all the steps. Alright, so once we draw our chart and we get it labeled, step 2, we want to go ahead and fill in the given information. So fill in the given information. Once we've filled in the given information, we want to write variables in. So we want to choose variables in and put them in our chart. Step 4, we're going to complete the chart and find total columns. All right, so complete the chart. Finding these total columns will help us to set up equations to solve. All right, step 5. We want to go ahead and write an equation . And usually what we're going to do is we're going to add the last column boxes and we're going to set equal to the mixes column for your first equation. And I'll show you what this looks like when we do our examples. And finally, the last step is to solve the equation and label answers. So there are our 6 steps. All right, now you're going to need your example sheet for this. We're going to go ahead and look at a few examples. We'll do a couple together, and then I've got one for you to do on your own. All right, so let's look at our first example. All right, example 1. Josh has one solution that is 10% iodine and another that is 50% iodine. How much of each should Josh use to get 100 milliliters of a mixture that is 20% iodine? All right, so we're going to use our different steps to solve this problem. First step is to draw the chart and to label the columns and rows. So what we're going to do is we're going to draw our chart. Now, when we draw it, we always want to have enough rows so that we have a row for each mixture, and then we want to have a row for our total solution. All right, and then we're also going to have 3 columns as well. All right, so here's how we're going to label this. We're going to look at the 2 different solutions that we're mixing. One is our 10% iodine, so we're going to label one row as 10%. And we've got another solution that's 50% iodine, so one row is going to be 50%. And then down here in the last row, we have our mix. This is our mixture of the 2. And this is where we're going to get our 20% iodine. Okay, and going back to our formula, we're going to use our formula to label our columns. The formula is the number of units times the percent of something equals the units of something. In this case, when our first column is going to be number of units. And our units in this column is milliliters. Okay, so our first column is going to be number of milliliters. In the next part of our equation, we're looking for a percent of something. In this case, it's percent iodine. So our second box is going to be percent iodine. And then it's always equal to the units of something. All right, so this is going to be the milliliters of iodine. All right, so now that we've drawn our box, step 2 is to fill the given information in the chart. Okay, we don't know how much of the 10%, and we don't know how much of the 50%, but we do know that in the mixture, we want to end up with 100 milliliters. So number of milliliters for our mixture is going to be 100. All right, we know in the 10% iodine solution that it is 10%. In the 50% iodine solution, it's 50%. And we know that we want a mixture that's 20%. So that will go here. All right, now we're going to use step 3. We're going to place some variables in the chart. What are we looking for? The question says how much of each. So we're looking for the number of milliliters for the 10%, and we're looking for the number of milliliters for the 50%. Now, since they're both going to be different, they don't say anything about them being the same, so we're going to call them by different names. I'm going to call one X, and I'm going to call one Y. All right, so I've filled in my variables. Now I'm going to complete the chart, and I'm going to total my columns. All right, now in our equation, it's number of milliliters times iodine equals units of iodine. So we're going to multiply the two sections to equal a total over here. So X times 10 is 10X. Y times 50 is 50Y. And 100 times 20 is 2,000. Okay, so we've completed our chart. All right, so that takes us all the way to step 4. Step 5 is to write an equation. Now, your equation is going to be based on where your variables are at. So look at your columns and determine where your variables are located. All right, we have a column. In one column, we have variables and we're looking for a number of milliliters. And in another column, we are looking for the milliliters of iodine. Both of these columns contain variables, so we're going to use those two columns to create our equations. Now, the question says how much of each should we use, but we know that we want to end up with 100 milliliters. So we're going to take our number of milliliters plus our number of milliliters is going to be equal to 100. So one equation is going to be X plus Y equals 100. Then we're going to use this right here, this column, and we're going to write our second equation. 10X plus 50Y equals 2,000. Okay, when we have two equations with two unknowns, how do we go about solving them? Either substitution or elimination. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and use elimination. I'm going to multiply the entire top by -10. All right, so that would be 40Y equals 1,000. Divide both sides by 40. Y is going to be 25. Okay, and remember that is a number of milliliters. So Y is 25 milliliters, and we're going to label it 25 milliliters as the 50%. Now I want to get a total to be 100. So what plus 25 will give me 100? Well, that is 75. So X is going to equal 75 milliliters, and that's milliliters of the 10%. All right, so we have solved our equations and labeled our solutions. All right, let's look at a second example. Example 2. Mark has one solution that is 10% salt and 90% water, and another solution that is only 2% salt. How many milliliters of each should Mark use to make 1,400 milliliters of a solution that is 6% salt? So the first thing we need to do is draw our chart and label our columns and rows. Okay, we have two solutions that we're mixing together. And we have 3 columns based on our formula. Now when we label it, our columns are number of milliliters, with our units of milliliters. Here, it's going to be percent. And in the problem, we are looking at how many milliliters of each should Mark use to make 1,400 milliliters of a solution that is 6% salt. So we're looking for percent of salt, not percent of water. So our percent is going to be percent salt. And our last column is going to be milliliters of salt. All right, we have two solutions. 1% is 10% salt. One solution is 2% salt. And then we want to end up with a mixture. All right, so we have drawn our box, we've labeled our column. Now we want to go ahead and fill in the given information. All right, we don't know how many milliliters there is at the 10%. We're not given how many milliliters that there is at the 2%. But we do know that in the mix, we want to end up with 1,400 milliliters. All right, in our 10% salt solution, we have 10% salt. In our 2% salt solution, we have 2% salt. And in our mixture, we want to end up with 6% salt. Nice. It's right here. All right, so we filled in the given information. Now we're going to place our variables in the chart. Again, we don't know how many of each of the 10% and the 2% solutions we have. The problem said nothing about them being the same amount. So we are going to go ahead and assume that they are different, and one is going to be X and one is going to be Y. And then we want to go ahead and complete the chart by multiplying the information to give us our last column. All right, so 10 times X is 10X, 2 times Y is 2Y, and 6 times 1,400 is going to give me 8,400. All right, the next step is to set up our equation. Okay, we know that we look for where our variables are located, so we're going to use our number of milliliters column for our first equation. And we're going to use our units of salt for our second equation. So our equations are going to look like this. X plus Y equals 1,400. And 10X plus 2Y equals 8,400. All right, then the last step is to solve the equation and label the answers. From here, substitution or elimination. All right, so what I'd like you to do is go ahead and solve this equation, find your solutions, and then on the next example on your example sheet, on the back page, example number 3, I want you to go ahead and solve that one, set it up, draw your chart, label it, fill in the information, set up your equations when solved, and we will check in class.